Welcome to Iconically Iconic.
Hello, babes. Welcome back to the channel. If you are new, welcome. So, in today's video, we are going to discuss the complicated Miss Serena Woodsen. So, let's get into it. So, I wanted to discuss the complex life of Serena. Many people seem to have this hate towards her because of their love for Blair, which is usually projection. So many like to say things like, it's just a TV show when we discuss TV characters, but shows are meant to be discussed and usually drawn from real life situations, especially Gossip Girl. It may not be realistic for teens who don't come from wealth and that lifestyle, but it's a very realistic portrayal for those that do. And I am not here for nonsensical dribble from people who can't handle critique for characters because you're so obsessed with them. Now, moving along. From a very young age, Serena was neglected by her parents and preyed on by both men and women. Serena had no example of stability aside from her family being financially stable and coming from wealth. Her mother was in and out of relationships and constantly dumped her children on nannies and the mothers of her daughter's friends and abandoning her parental duties, forcing her daughter to grow up fast and feel neglected. Serena had no one in her corner, I believe, who genuinely loved and cared for her. I feel like Lily hated her own daughter sometimes because she was a reminder of her younger self and her failure as a parent. Lily only cared about image, and anytime Serena would act out, instead of talking to her daughter and pouring into her and actually getting her help, she would have her put in a facility, not get her therapy and ensure her daughter get better, or send her off to boarding school. She didn't want to deal with what Serena had going on. She would ignore all of the problems and would just want people again to deal with the issues that Lily was the reason for. She reminds me a bit of Kathy Hilton with Paris. Lily would throw the problem at someone else to deal with because she didn't want to deal with it. It's like she didn't even understand that her daughter was a victim. Case in point, when she watches the video of a man trying to force himself on her daughter and quote unquote friend setting her up to film a tape in her doing drugs, she got mad at her when any other caring parent would have broken down crying and would be enraged, not with their daughter, but the man and deviant, abominable friend.
I saw that little home movie that you and your friends made.
You watched that?
Well, only part of it. I stopped when that guy had his tongue down your throat. But I can pretty much guess how it ends.
No, it was just a joke. We were kidding. It's not what it looked
You know
like.
what? You were out of control. I always knew you had a wild side. But how can you look at yourself? What have you become? I thought we were past all of this, Serena. I thought you were doing so well. I have nothing left but to send you to reformatory school. What do you think about that?
When we meet Serena, she's 16 years old and already has an immense amount of baggage and trauma. She's into heavy drinking and doing drugs as a way to cope with all that she had been through. Instead of being viewed as a human, she was viewed as an object from a very young age. There were grown men lusting after this girl, and of course, the apologists like to say things like, she was mature for her age. She threw herself at them. And there is always this air of victim blaming and dismissing the behavior of disgusting grown men who need to be away from society, which I think is because people want to bury their heads in the sand, and it also means that they would have to confront their own family members and issues they have, so they tend to throw blame on the victim because in their mind it releases some of the guilt. And then some are narcissists who will never change and need help. Something that Serena dealt with a lot. Serena was a girl with daddy issues who sought out love in men that she didn't get from her father. She would fall in love with men and sabotage her relationships. Something that has always been so interesting to me though is how people bashed her or shamed her for dating different guys as if she wasn't a young teenager. It made complete sense that she wasn't tied down to a guy for years. I mean, when we meet her As I stated before, she's 16 years old. She's not 25 or 22. She's a teenager, and every teen is different. Let's get into the predatory men and women who preyed on Serena. Starting out with Mr. Whiny, self-righteous Dan Humphrey, Mr. Gossip Girl himself. Dan used Serena as a source to help him get into her circle and gain popularity. When he met her at that party and she was the only one who spoke to him, he knew that she would be the one to pull him in, because she didn't see people who didn't come from wealth as less than. Dan fell for the idea of Serena and his fantasy of her, but he was also with her as a way to get into her circle, something he always wanted. Dan thought of Serena the same way Blair did. He just didn't vocalize it in the way that Blair would. He thought he was better than her in some ways because he saw her as an airhead who didn't have the same values as him. I didn't see him as some great boyfriend. I think he was more so infatuated with her than in love. Serena loved him way more than he did her. He was intimidated by Serena and her personality as well as her past, which is why he would flip out anytime a piece of her past came up. He also knew although she was in love with him, she could get any guy she wanted who had more than he did. He was jealous and manipulative when he wanted to be, and went on to date and fall in love with her best friend years later. If the tables were turned, Dan would have lost his marbles, and the same goes for Miss Blair. And then to find out he was Gossip Girl, there is no way you truly loved her. Serena was just always so forgiving and understanding, something that Dan knew, but she never got that same grace with Dan. I feel like he was envious of her and mad at himself for falling in love with her. He was a hypocrite and had all of these qualms about Serena's world while secretly wanting to be a part of it, and was nothing more than a slithering snake, and Serena was his prey. He saw how naive, welcoming, and warm she was and used that to his advantage. And while Chuck had his elitist, low-down, no-good-for-nothing ways, he was always able to see through people, and he had Dan's card from the jump. When Serena was being blackmailed by Georgina, the only thing on this man's mind was, did she cheat on him? Because he was so fixated on Serena's past that was the only thing that could come to surface for him, and that was the only thing that he could think about. He ran his mouth to a random stranger about his girlfriend, but claims to be so loyal, and then hops in the bed with this woman because, oh wait, he thought that she cheated on him. After she tells him everything that took place, instead of consoling her and being understanding, he judges her and breaks up with her like he always does.
So what, Dan? We're exactly where we were at the Basses brunch when we first started dating. I'm not who you thought I was, and you can't forgive that.
I just think too much has happened. I don't know how to make things go back to what they were.
So that's it then? It's just... have a good summer. I'll see you back at school.
Now let's get to Mr. Ben. Ben was also a predator. While he was innocent and lied on by Lily for something that didn't take place at the time, this man was hanging out with a student who he had an attraction to. Serena was 16, a minor, and he was a 22-year-old grown adult. First off, hanging out with a student is inappropriate and unprofessional within itself, but to have an attraction to said student is predatory and disgusting. He had interest in her, and those words came out of his mouth. He went across state lines to take her to some library, which was out of pocket. Serena had a crush like most young girls and guys have on their teachers. It's something that's normal. It doesn't mean you have to act on it, but as an adult, you know better. And if you have an attraction to any student, you have no business being a teacher or being around children. And anyone who tries to excuse that behavior needs to be put on the FBI's watch list. Then he went on to date her. You have Chuck in the very first episode trying to SA her because of what happened between her and Nate, And everyone always seems to forgive the men in this show, while women have things held over their heads forever. Now, while I don't agree with what Serena did to Blair, and it was terrible, she betrayed her and caused a crack in their friendship. Like I said in my Blair breakdown video, she forgave Nate and told him not to speak to Serena, while calling her a slut every chance she got, because she was jealous of Serena and another predator who used Serena for her benefit, and Blair was just a pick-me. Serena seemed to be her best self when she was far away from the city and her circle. She would excel in school. I think she needed a few years to be on her own outside of the craziness that was the Upper East Side. She was young, and people like to pretend that her not having career goals and her life being completely planned out was unrealistic, when it's the opposite. No one ever asked Serena what she was passionate about. Instead, she was always told what to do. Everyone is different, just like siblings are different. You have people who know what they want to do from a very young age and achieve that. You have people who follow in their parents' footsteps, and then you have people who struggle to figure out what they want to do, and it leads them into depression and self-doubt because they feel like they're the only one who doesn't have their things together and don't know what they want to do. And it was definitely something that Serena struggled with. Part of that was also due to her upbringing. Lily saying that Serena has never been a child explains how she was forced to grow up and exposed to things a child shouldn't be exposed to. And what people don't take into account is the constant moving around with her mother and different husbands, which caused Serena to be indecisive when it came to making decisions for herself. The little girl in Serena was never healed and nurtured, something that is reflected even in her adult years. She acts out for attention as a cry for help because she was never seen by her mother and father, because Lily was an inconsistent parent for much of Serena's life, not just her father. She would be gone for months and pop in from time to time. As Eric said himself, they were raised by nannies. And that is a vital part of growing up as a child and having your parents around. People seem to think that money fixes everything and you just throw money at something and it solves the problem. Okay, you have unlimited resources to clothes, food, home, whatever the case may be, but you don't have love. You don't have a parent raising you, which is essential. I also want to touch on how a lot of people don't like Serena out of jealousy. And some of you like to call out men for being misogynistic while the phone is ringing in your own house. Some of you hate beautiful women for simply just being beautiful. They could be the nicest person, have the kindest heart, and always help people and look out for people. But because you're so insecure and filled with envy, you automatically equate them to being evil or dumb because they're beautiful on the outside. You want to see beautiful women suffer just like some men. And if we're being honest, some of you are worse than men. You assume that because a woman is beautiful, she never struggled or had issues. You project your bitterness and sour spirit onto them. No one is exempt from being a bad person. We know that beautiful people can be bad, as well as people who you may not find to be attractive. But some of you hope and wish for them to be bad people so that you can justify your reason for hating them so much. And a lot of you have the spirit of Juliet and Blair. Please realize that dark energy eats at you and makes you an unbearable, pessimistic human that no one wants to be around. And not only that, how you treat others will come back onto you. The amount of people who make claims of Blair working hard and Serena just being pretty and getting her way is quite laughable, because both girls came from wealth and they were both beautiful. Everything Blair got was because of nepotism and connections. Her getting into NYU was because of Cyrus making calls to get her in. Her taking over her mother's clothing line was because, of course, it's her mother's. Chuck helping her out and using his connections to get her into places like Columbia, which is why when she went to NYU and no one bowed to her and who she knew, she couldn't understand it. The only thing that separated Blair and Serena were their styles and interests. Blair wanted to be a powerful woman, but didn't even have a career goal. You want to be a powerful woman doing what exactly? Aside from people praising you, do you want to make a change? Do you care about people? Do you want to make a difference? No. She just wanted to be all the way at the top so she could forever look down on people. But her and Serena weren't much different. Serena did things on her own with her charm and personality. And some of you may not like it, but that's the way it is. Your personality and charm will open up doors. Yes, you can be beautiful, but you also have to have a personality. And Blair sadly did not have that. Like with the whole Yale debacle, which I don't know why Blair thought she owned that school and was the only one who could be accepted into Yale. The fact is that in order for Serena to even remain at a school like Constance, they pride themselves on being the best and having high graduation rates and successful students, and Serena was that. That means high GPAs, attendance, extracurricular activities, etc. Which is why Lily had to go to such extreme measures to get Serena back in. People seem to forget that you don't just get into an Ivy League off of grades alone. There are plenty of people who you are going up against, and not just in the US. What makes you so special? Why should they accept you into their school? Blair gave very much Rory when it came to Yale, and it was so annoying. Now, both Serena and Blair were pulled for interviews at Yale, which meant they wanted to know more about them. And Serena had something Blair didn't: charm, likability, personality, and she made people feel comfortable with her and to open up to her. Just like a job interview, why should I hire you? Okay, you've got all these years of experience, but we have 1,000 applicants who have that same experience. Why should we hire you? What makes you stand out and so special from the others? And aside from it being a dream of Blair's, she couldn't scheme her way into being liked, like she did with everything she got. And when it came down to it, Blair was closed off, distant, and uptight. And that is what she envied about Serena. Her free spirit, her independence, and how she could pick up and leave everything behind. Serena didn't have to force herself on people to be liked or bully and manipulate people. She wasn't judgmental, she didn't look down on others, and she was inviting to everyone, which was also a negative because she always wanted to see the best in some people who just weren't good people. But she didn't care about their wealth or class. Then Blair acted a complete fool and brought up one of Serena's traumatic experiences and used it against her. So her not being accepted into Yale was no fault of Serena's. It was her own dark, devious ways that came to bite her in the butt. I think the only one who truly loved Serena was Eric. No matter what, he always had his sister's back and would remind her of her worth, even when she couldn't see it for herself. She had her moments that made me dislike her actions, and she could sometimes be selfish and annoying. But one thing that didn't change was how she was genuinely kind to people. Serena never sought out to intentionally hurt people. For the most part, it was retaliation. I think she would have thrived if she had cut Blair off for good, moved away from the city for a few years, and figured out exactly what her calling was. I feel like she would have done a good job counseling troubled girls because of her own experiences and the empathy she had for others. She would see things others did not because of their own biased and classist ways. And she didn't think she was too good to go places her friend group looked down on. Serena reminds me of Paris Hilton in some ways. I think they got some inspiration from her life as well and found a way to demonize girls like Serena and overly sexualize them. Men taking advantage of her, using her status, amongst a multitude of other things. Serena was a source for people to pull from for their needs and desires. And when they couldn't do that or were finished with her, they would discard of her like she meant nothing to them. And with that being said, this video has come to an end. Don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Make sure your notification bells are turned on so that you always know when I upload. And I will catch you guys in the next one.